The evening humidity of the Caracas coastline was fractured at 2100 hours local time as the low-frequency thrum of high-altitude stealth propulsion systems gave way to the sharp, percussive ignition of precision electronic warfare suites. High above the Caribbean Sea, the invisible silhouettes of specialized U.S. aviation assets, operating under a veil of total radar obfuscation, began a systematic penetration of the sophisticated air defense network that has shielded the Venezuelan capital for decades. Below the flight path, the primary naval and radar installations at La Guaira, the maritime gateway to Caracas, and the logistical heartbeat of the Maduro administration's coastal defense, became the target of a concentrated electronic breach that effectively blinded regional monitoring arrays in a matter of seconds. The atmosphere within the Venezuelan command centers was one of sudden, clinical paralysis as screens flickered and as static and communication frequencies were flooded with ionized interference, marking a total failure of the physical architecture intended to detect such a high-tier incursion. This was not simply a localized surveillance flight or a standard freedom of navigation exercise in international waters. It was the formal and aggressive breaching of the most critical defense perimeter in the Western Hemisphere. According to official statements released by the Venezuelan Ministry of Defense and state-run media outlets in Caracas, the primary actor in this engagement, the United States, conducted a flagrant and unprovoked violation of sovereign Venezuelan airspace and maritime territory. Venezuelan officials claim that the U.S. assets targeted civilian communications infrastructure and regional navigation nodes, characterizing the event as a cyberkinetic hybrid assault intended to destabilize the nation's internal security. Military spokesman for the Bolivarian National Armed Forces stated that their strategic defense units successfully identified the incursion and utilized Russian-made S-300VM interceptor systems to force the retreat of the intruding aircraft, though they did not provide visual confirmation of the encounter. Symbolically, the Maduro administration maintains that this action represents a desperate attempt by Washington to reassert the Monroe Doctrine in an era of multipolar shifting alliances and declining American influence in Latin America. Strategically, the Venezuelan leadership claimed that this technological aggression only serves to justify the further integration of Iranian and Russian defensive hardware into their domestic security framework to prevent future breaches of the Caracas perimeter. But the story quickly became far more complicated. Before we break down the specific electronic signatures detected during this midnight breach and the classified nature of the sensor fusion technology utilized in this Caribbean sortie, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so you never miss the latest dramatic developments shaping global geopolitics. We are committed to bringing you the most measured and expert analysis of these rapidly evolving events as the security architecture of the Western Hemisphere undergoes a fundamental and perhaps irreversible shift, and your support ensures we can continue to provide this depth of coverage during times of escalating international crisis. According to U.S. Southern Command and high-level officials within the Department of Defense, the narrative from Caracas is a calculated misdirection designed to mask the total obsolescence of their integrated air defense networks. U.S. authorities stated that the operation was a pre-planned, defensive necessity aimed at neutralizing specific electronic intelligence gathering nodes that had been used to track and harass international transit ships in the Caribbean basin for months. Analysts noted that the breach utilized active cancellation technology, a method where the aircraft emits a signal that perfectly mimics and cancels out incoming radar waves, which rendered the S-300VM batteries effectively blind before they could even attempt a target acquisition. To understand the technical context, one must recognize how modern electronic suppression functions. By using digital radio frequency memory, the attacking force captures the enemy's radar pulse and sends it back with a slight delay or frequency shift, creating a ghost target that leads the defense system to track an empty patch of sky. American representatives maintained that the mission was a total tactical success, resulting in the verified mapping of the Caracas defense architecture and the temporary silencing of multiple coastal radar arrays without a single U.S. pilot being endangered. Between these narratives lies a complex reality that analysts are still working to understand. What does this mean for the stability of the Caribbean theater? The answer is the total collapse of the perceived invulnerability of the Venezuelan defense model. The port of La Guaira and the surrounding hills of Caracas are significant because they represent the last mile of the Maduro administration's strategic depth, acting as the indispensable component for the protection of the capital and the oversight of the region's vast energy reserves. Semiconductors move through here. Crude oil flows through here. Intelligence data is processed through here. By breaching this specific location, the United States is not just testing a radar site. It is threatening the very mechanism that ensures the survival of the Venezuelan sovereign state against external pressure. This matters because the Caracas perimeter is the only facility in the region capable of housing the sophisticated Russian-supplied telemetry equipment required to coordinate large-scale defensive operations against a high-tier adversary. Attacking or exposing the flaws in this stronghold carries strategic weight because it forces the Venezuelan leadership to either accept a permanent state of technological vulnerability or risk a more aggressive, conventional military buildup to compensate for their failing electronic net. The message was clear. The United States will exercise total aerial and electronic dominance over the Caribbean basin to deny strategic sanctuary to its regional competitors. The cascading consequences of this Caracas breach began to ripple through the regional security architecture almost immediately. Immediate military reaction was observed as the Venezuelan Ministry of Defense ordered an immediate mobilization of its coastal militias and moved mobile missile launchers into the urban centers of Caracas, while regional allies in Havana and Managua began a visible increase in their own maritime patrol activities to signal solidarity. This mobilization triggered a chain reaction where neighboring governments in Bogotá, Brasilia, and Georgetown placed their own border units on high alert, fearing a potential spillover of the military friction into the disputed Essequibo region or the shared Amazonian borders. That spike in military hostility has consequences far beyond the shores of Venezuela. In the global markets, the price of heavy crude oil saw an instantaneous uptick of 3.2% as investors braced for potential disruptions to the regional supply chain and the possibility of new, more restrictive maritime sanctions. Shipping insurance premiums for vessels operating in the Caribbean skyrocketed. Energy stocks climbed. Transportation costs surged. Security expenses spiked. Diplomatic channels are currently operating under extreme duress, with the Organization of American States calling for an emergency session to prevent a full-scale regional escalation. Middle powers in the region are facing intense pressure to choose between their historical security ties to Washington and their burgeoning economic dependence on the energy and infrastructure projects backed by the East. In the United States, domestic political reaction has been a display of stark contrast. While some leaders in Congress praise the decisive testing of adversary defenses as a restoration of regional deterrence, others question the risk of being dragged into another protracted conflict in the Southern Hemisphere without a clear exit strategy or humanitarian roadmap. The United States maintains that the breach of the Caracas perimeter was a necessary and defensive measure to ensure regional stability and protect the freedom of the global commons. Venezuela maintains that the operation was an illegal act of aggression that will result in a crushing, asymmetrical response against American interests in the region. As the specialized electronic warfare teams in Washington and Caracas sift through the data of this midnight encounter, the world is left to wonder if the era of strategic patience has officially ended, replaced by the cold reality of direct technological confrontation. The transition from a simmering political rivalry to an open exchange of high-tier electronic interference marks a turning point as significant as any in the last 2 decades of Latin American history. Will this breach remain an isolated incident, or is it the beginning of something far larger? Stay tuned for further updates as this situation continues to develop. And don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss the latest dramatic geopolitical developments shaping the world.